It started with a car crash. A young woman, barely 20, who everyone in Izena's church had known. One Sunday, after Pastor Izena laid his hands on her and declared her blessed beyond measure, she drove off to visit her family and never made it back alive. Her car flipped on a quiet road, bursting into flames, and she was gone. The congregation was shaken. Pastor Izena held a vigil, urging everyone to pray for her soul, his voice heavy with sorrow. He prayed loudly, passionately, as if her loss hurt him deeply. But that was only the first of the strange deaths. A few weeks later, it was a young father of two who had come to Izena for prayer after a job loss. Izena had prayed fervently for him, promising him new beginnings. Days later, the man's house caught fire in the middle of the night, trapping him inside. His wife and children barely escaped. As the congregation mourned another loss, a pattern started to form, though most people dismissed it, not wanting to believe something so dark. Only Kalu, Izena's younger brother, noticed the unsettling trend. Kalu was a pastor too, in a smaller, less glamorous church not far from Izena's. He started to wonder if these weren't just tragic coincidences. But how could he bring up something like this to his brother? Was it even possible? Several months earlier, before these tragic deaths, things had been different. Izena and Kalu were just two brothers trying to serve God. But their ministries couldn't have looked more different. While Izena had his sights set on growing his church into a megachurch, Kalu was content with his small but steady congregation, focusing on preaching the gospel and helping those in need. However, as time passed, Izena grew frustrated. He saw his friends, men like Pastor Obina and Pastor Uche, leading churches packed with people, offering praise and donations at every service. These men drove luxury cars, lived in large homes, and were even called to speak on TV. Meanwhile, Izena's congregation barely filled half the room on a good Sunday. They struggled to pay for church repairs, and he had to preach in worn-out robes. One evening after service, Izena's frustration spilled over during a conversation with Kalu. "Kalu," he said, pacing the floor, "don't you ever wonder why we work so hard and yet have so little to show for it?" Kalu, seated calmly by the altar, shrugged. "I'm happy with what God has given me. Isn't that enough?" Izena frowned. "It's not enough for me. I look around and I see our friends, people we went to seminary with, living like kings. They have thousands flocking to hear them preach. Why shouldn't we have that?" Kalu shifted uncomfortably. "Izena, you know God's work isn't about fame or riches. Those things can be distractions.